Okay, everyone, in today's material, in this presentation, we're going to discuss about phonology and phonetics. Next. But before that, let us introduce ourselves. My name is Putu Anindya Apsari with the student ID of 221-202-1165.
And my name is Nabila Maharani. The student ID is 2212-021162.
My name is Indah Amalya. In the student ID is 2212-021156.
And my name is Tiari. My student ID is 2212-202-1147. Okay, in today's material, we're going to discuss about phonology and phonetics. Okay, for the first material, I will tell about phonetics. Phonetics is study of speech sounds. To describe speech sounds, it is necessary to know what an individual sound is and how each sound differs from all others. Next. This is identity of speech sounds. The first one is acoustic phonetics. Acoustic phonetics focuses on the physical properties of sound waves that result from the production of sounds. As one speaks, the sounds that he produces create airwaves that travel from the speaker's mouth to the hearer's ear. This is what makes the listener hear what the speaker says. The second one is auditory phonetics. Auditory phonetics is concerned with how listeners perceive the sounds. As just stated, when one speaks, the sounds that he produces create sound waves. The sound waves strike the ears of the listener. Next. The last one is articulatory phonetics. The primary articulatory phonetics is the primary concern of this chapter is the study of how the vocal tract produces the sounds of language. The focuses on sound production necessarily means that this branch of must handle the speech mechanism that is involved in sound productions. Next, I will explain about the phonetic alphabet. In 1888, members of the International Phonetic Association developed a phonetic alphabet to symbolize the sounds of all languages. They utilized both ordinary letters and embedded symbols. Each character of the alphabet had exactly one value across all of the world's languages. Here is the table of a phonetic alphabet for English pronunciation. And the next is an example of video of example the phonetic alphabet.
Oh. Oh. Two. Yeah. Yeah. So Red. Time. Do. Church. Judge. Pillow. Go. Five. Very. Six. The. Six. Super. Short. Casual. No. No. Hello. Live. Red. Read. Window. Yes. Yes.
Okay, after showing the video, I will explain you about articulatory of speech. The production of any sound involves the movement of air. Most speech sounds are produced by pushing lung air through the vocal cords of the throat into the mouth or nose and finally out of the body. Here are the part of the vocal tract. There are glottis, larynx, pharynx, oral cavity, and nasal cavity. Next. Next is consonants. Consonants are produced with some restriction or closure in the vocal tract that impedes the flow of air from the lungs. In phonetics, the terms consonant and vowel refer to types of sounds, not to the letters that represent them. In speaking of the alphabet, we may call a vowel and a consonant, but that means only that we use the letter A to represent vowel sounds and the letter C to represent consonant sounds. Next is place of articulation. We classify consonants according to where in the vocal tract the airflow restriction occurs, called the place of articulation. Movement of the tongue and lips creates the constriction, reshaping the oral cavity in various ways to produce the various sounds. We are about to discuss the major places of articulation. Here are the trach voice, which is place of articulation. The first one is bilabials, which is up, and When we produce a or we articulate by bringing both lips together. The second one is labiodentals, which is oof. We also use our lips to form oof, and we articulate these sounds by touching the bottom lip to the upper teeth. The third one is interdentals, which is th. If in word we pronounce t, t. And the second one is also th. If in words we pronounce tat. These sounds, both spelled t, are pronounced by inserting the tip of the tongue between the teeth. However, for some speakers, the tongue merely touches behind the teeth, making a sound more correctly called dental. Next. The fourth one is alveolars, which is t, t, n, s, l, and r. All 7 of these sounds are pronounced with the tongue raised in various ways to the alveolar ridge. For the first is T, D, and N. The tongue tip is raised and touches the ridge or slightly in front of it. The second is for S and Z. The sides of the front of the tongue are raised, but the tip is lowered so that air escapes over it. For L, the tongue tip is raised while the rest of the tongue remains down, permitting air to escape over its sides. Hence, L is called a lateral sound. You can feel this in the L's of Lolita. The third one is for R in IPA. Most English speakers either curl the tip of the tongue back behind the alveolar ridge or bunch up the top of the tongue behind the ridge, as opposed to the articulation of L when R is articulated. As air escapes through the central part of the mouth, it is central liquid. Next is palatals. Here are the symbol of palatals. For these sounds, which occur in mission, measure, chip, judge, and yo-yo, the constriction occurs by raising the front part of the tongue to the palate. Next is velars, which is K, G, and N. Another class of sounds is produced by raising the back of the tongue to the soft palate or velum. The initial and final sounds of the words kick and jig, and the final sounds of the words back, bag, and bang are all velar sounds. Next is uvulars, which is R, Q, and G. Uvular sounds are produced by raising the back of the tongue to the uvula, the fleshy protuberance that hangs down in the back of our throats. The R in French is often a uvular trill symbolized by R. The uvular sounds Q and D occur in Arabic. These sounds do not ordinarily occur in English. Next is glottals. Here are the symbol of glottals. The sound of H is from the flow of air through the open glottis and past the tongue and lips as they prepare to pronounce a vowel sound, which always follows H. If the air is stopped completely and the glottis by tightly closed vocal cords, the sound upon release of the cords is a glottal stop. The interjection which you hope never to hear your dentist utter, has two glottal stops and is spelled phonetically. Next. Next, I will continue with manner of articulation. Speech sounds also vary in the way the airstream is affected as it flows from the lungs up and out of the mouth and nose. It may be blocked or partially blocked. The vocal cords may vibrate or not vibrate. We refer to this as the manner of articulation. Here are the glottal stops symbol. We are seeing finer and finer distinction of speech sounds. However, both T and S are voiceless alveolar oral sounds. What distinguishes them? After all, tech and sac are different words. Next is phonemic patterns may vary across languages. We have seen that the same phones may occur in two languages, but patterned differently because the phonologies are different. English, Portuguese and Akan have oral and nasal vowel phones. In English, oral and nasal vowels are allophones of one phoneme, whereas in Portuguese and Akan they represent distinct phonemes. Okay, the next is palatals. Here are the symbols of palatals. For these sounds which occur in mission, measure, chip, judge, and yo-yo. The construction occurs by raising the front part of the tongue to the palate. Fillers K, G, and N. Another class of sounds is produced by raising the back of the tongue to the soft palate or velum. The initial and final sounds of the words kick and jig, and the final sounds of the words back, beg, and bang are all filler sounds. The next is voiced and voiceless sounds. If the vocal cords are together, the airstream forces its way through and causes them to vibrate. Such sounds are voiced. The voiced or voiceless distinction is very important in English. This phonetic property distinguishes the words in pairs like the following: robe with robe, fade with fade, rag with rag, writ with writ. Voiceless sounds fall into two classes depending on the timing of the vocal cord closure. When we say Pete, the vocal cords remain open for a very short time after the lips come apart to release the P. We call this P aspirated because a brief puff of air escapes before the glottis closes. When we pronounce the P in speed, however, the vocal cord start vibrating as soon as the lips open.
Okay, for these slides, I will discuss it. So, up, and are bilabial stops, with the airstream stopped at the mouth by the complete closure of the lips. At, and N are alveolar stops. The airstream is stopped by the tongue, making a complete closure at the alveolar ridge. Uk, ug, and are velar stops with a complete closure at the velum, and ch, as in church, and ch, as in judge, are palatal affricates with complete stop closure. And this is a glottal stop, and the air is completely stopped at the glottis. It's spelled T as in the football. Next. Next is fricative. There is F, V, and D, and D, S, Z, and then S, also Z, X, and then H. The production of some continents, the airflow is so severely obstructed that it causes friction, and the sounds are therefore called fricative. Next. F and V are labiodental fricative. The friction is created at the lips and teeth, where a narrow passage permits the air to escape. The T and think and D as in D are interdental fricative, represented by the T in tin and den. The friction occurs at the opening between the tongue and the teeth. S and Z are alveolar fricative, with the friction created at the alveolar ridge. Next. Sh and j are palatal fricative, and contrast in such a pair as mission and measure. And x donate palar fricative. They are produced by raising the back of the tongue towards, but not quite touching the velum. The friction is created as air passes through that narrow passage, and the sound is not unlike clearing your throat. And ha is a glottal fricative. Its relatively weak sounds come from air passing through the opening glottis and pharynx. Next. All fricatives are continuous, although the airstream is obstructed as it passes through the oral cavity. It is not completely stopped. Affricates such as sh and j. These sounds are produced by a stop closure followed immediately by gradually release of the closure, and that produce an effect characteristic of a fricative. Liquids such as L and R is the production of the sound L and R. There is some obstruction of the airstream in the mouth, but not enough to cause any real constriction or friction. Glides such as j and w, the sound j and w, the initial sounds of j and we are produced with a little obstruction of the airstream. Approximant the sound w, j, and o may also be called approximants because the articulators approximate a friction closeness, but no actual friction occurs. The first three are central approximation, whereas o is the lateral approximant. Next. Next, we have nasal and oral sounds. The voice or voiceless distinction differentiate bilabials and up. The sounds is also bilabial and it is voiced. What distinguishes it from b or up? So here we have the picture that shows the vibration and a voice that it's produced. When we say bin, when we move our lips together, it already create a vibration in bin, so it becomes a voice. And in spin, there is a word opening when we put our lips together, and then vibrates when we move our lips apart. And then in pin, when we say pin, when we move our lips together, there is a chords open. And then when we move our lips apart, there is still a bit of chords open, and then the vibration, creating a different voice, a voiceless aspirated. Next. Next is the image, the position of lips when we say up and up. When we move our lips together and the volume down, it will create And when we say up and up, we move our lips together with the volume up. Next. This is the additional example of allomorph. So we are seeing finers and finer distinction of speech sound. Stops are consonant in which the airstream is completely blocked in the oral cavity for short periods, 10 of milliseconds. Next. Up and are bilabial stops, with the airstream stopped at the mouth by the complete closure of the lips. At, and un are alveolar stops. The airstream is stopped by the tongue, making a complete closure at the alveolar ridge. Ug, and are velar stopped with a complete closure at the velum. Ch and j are palatal affricative with complete stop closure. And it is a global stop that air is completely stopped at the glottis. Next. X donate velar fricative. They are fully produced by raising and back of the tongue towards but not quite touching the velum. And h is a glottal fricative. It's a relatively weak sound, come from N pressing the through come from air passing through the open glottis and pharynx. Next. Next, we have trills and flaps. The R sound of many languages may be different from the English R. A trilled R is produced by the rapid vibration and articulator. An alveolar trill, as in Spanish word for dog, perro, is produced by vibrating the tongue tip against the alveolar ridge. Another R sound is called flap and is produced by a flick of the tongue against the alveolar ridge. It sounds like a very fast D. Clicks. These exotic sounds are made by moving air in the mouth between various articulators. Next, we have phonetic symbol for American English consonant. The row stands for manner of articulation and the column for place of articulation. The interiors are sufficient to distinguish all words in English from another. There are stop, nasal, fricative, affricative, glide, and liquid. There's also bilabial, labiontal, irdental, alveolar, palatal, velar, and glottal. In bilabial, the stop are up and up, with the voiceless is up and the voice is up. So that is the example. Next. This is also the example of consonant in English word, with the stop of is voiceless and voice in the bilabial pi and bi, with pi being voiceless and bi being voiced. Next. Next is going to be discussed by my friend.
Okay, I will continue. Vowels. Vowels are produced with little restriction of the air flow from the lungs or through the mouth and or the nose. Vowel sounds carry pitch and loudness. You can sing vowels or short vowels. They may be longer or shorter in duration. Vowels can stand alone. They can be produced without consonant before or after them. Next. Okay, first, lip rounding. Vowels also differ as to whether the lips are rounded or split. The back vowels u, u and n in both put, but, and both are the only rounded vowels in American English. Diphthongs. A diphthong is a sequence of two vowels, sounds squeezed together. Diphthongs are present in the phonetic inventory of many languages, including English. The vowels we have studied so far are simple vowels, called monophthongs. Next. Nasalization of vowels. Vowels, like consonant, can be produced with a raised phlegm that prevents the air from escaping to the nose, or with a lowered phlegm that permits air to pass through the nasal passage. Tense and lax vowels. The first vowels in each pair is generally produced with greater tension of the tongue muscle than is the counterpart, and it's often a little longer in duration. Next. Major phonetic classes. All sounds are consonant sounds or vowel sounds, though some play dual roles. Within consonant, all are voiced or unvoiced. And so on, all the classes of sounds described so far in this chapter combine to form large, more general classes that are important in the patterning of sounds in the world language. Next. Non-continuous and continuance. Stops and abbreviates belong to the class of non-continuance. There is a total obstruction of the airstream in the oral cavity. Nasal stops are included, although air does flow continuously out the nose. Obstruents and sonorants. The non-nasal stops, the fricative and the affricative, from a major class of sounds called obstruents. Sounds are not obstruents, are sonorants. Vowels, nasal stop and 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 glides j and w are all sonorants. With glides j and w, however, the restriction is minimal and they are the most vowel-like and the least consonant-like of the consonant. Glides might even be referred to as semi-vowels or semi-consonant. In recognition of this fact, linguistics place to the obstruent nasal stop and liquids in a subclass of consonant called consonantal, from which the glides are excluded. Here are some other terms used to form subclasses of consonantal sounds. They are not exhaustive, nor are they mutually exclusive. Labial, p, b, m, f, v, w, and m labial sounds are thus articulate with the influence of the lips. They include the class of bilabial sounds and b and m, the labiodentals, f and v, and the labiovelar is w and m. Next. Coronas. Coronal sounds are articulated by raising the tongue blade. Coronals include the interdentals and t and the alveolars t, time and do, n, and z, the palatal ch and j, the affricates ch and j, and the liquids l and r. Next is anteriors. P. Anterior sounds are consonants produced in the front of part of the mouth. That is from the alveolar area forward. They include the labials, the interdentals, and the alveolars. Next is sibilant. This class of consonantal sound is characterized by acoustic rather than articulatory property of its members. The friction created by sibilants produces as hissing sounds, which is a mixture of high-frequency sounds. Prosodic features. Length, pitch, and stress or accent are prosodic or suprasegmental features. They are features over and above the segmental value, such as place or manner of articulation, thus the supra in suprasegmental. Tone and intonation. Languages that use the pitch of individual vowels or syllables to contrast meaning of words are called toned languages. Rather than pitch, we use the term toned. Languages that use the pitch of individual vowels of syllables to contrast meaning of words are called toned languages. Rather than pitch, we use the term toned. Languages that use the pitch of individual vowels or syllables to contrast meaning of words are called tone languages. Rather than pitch, we use the term tone. There are two kinds of tones. If the pitch is level across the syllable, we have a registered tone. If the pitch changes across the syllable, whether from high to low or vice versa, we have a countertone. Tones generally have a lexical function, that is, they make a difference between words. But in some languages, tones may also have a grammatical function, as an Edo spoken in mid-western Nigeria. The tone on monosyllabic verb followed by a direct object indicates the tense of and transitivity of the verb. The lowering of the pitch is called downdrive. In language, with the downdrive is a high tone that occurs after a low tone, or a low tone after a high tone, is lower in pitch than the First, the similarly marked tone. Intonation is variation of pitch that is not used to distinguish words. Languages that are not tone language, such as a language or French, are called intonation languages. Okay, next we continue.
So I will continue. This is a table of phonetic symbol and spelling correspondences. Next. This is a table of vowels. And here is a video for example of how to vowel sounds pronunciation.
Bit, which, the long vowel sound, e, meat, eat, speech, sheep, believes. Next, we have the vowel sound, book, computer, book, sugar. Next, we have a longer sound, You'll hear this sound. Use, spoon, choose, spoon, computer. Let's move on. Short F vowels. F, F. Below that we have N. N. You hear this sound, words like cat, compact. Interesting sound. Next we have my favorite sound. It's the laziest sound in English. It's also the most commonly heard sound in English. You'll hear it a lot. Today, teacher, the, around, and then the, words, first, word, verbs. Notice that the same English sound can be used for all of those different letters. In that example, look at words heard, word, use different letters but make the same sound. That's why learning the IPAs.
So I will continue. Some of this pronunciation may differ from your own. For example, you might or may not pronunciation the words cat, coat, and cow identically. In the form of English described here, coat and cow are pronounced differently, so coat, and one of the example of the vowel sounds L and S in car. This is the phonetic side languages. The signal of ASL, for example, are formatted by their major features. Number one, the configuration of the hand or the hand shape, the movement of the hand and arms in signing space. 3. The location of the hands is signing space. Next, to illustrate how this feature define sign as ASL side meaning, mother is produced the typing of your chin with the thumb of the hand with all of finger extended as a spare finger hand shaped 5 hand shape. ASL has over 30 hand face movement can be either straight or in a ARC. So, the parallels that exist in the organization of sounds and signals are not surprising when we consider the similar cognitive system underlying both spoken and signal languages. The next material is phonology. Phonology is study of how speech sounds from patterns. The word phonology refers both to the linguistic knowledge the speakers have about the sound patterns of their language and to the description of that knowledge the linguistic try produce. The pronunciation of morphemes. Knowledge of phonology determines how we pronounce words and the parts of words we call morphemes. Often certain morphemes are pronounced different depending on their context. Phonemes, the phonology units of language. The section introduces the notion of phoneme and allophones. Phonemes are the basic form of sound essence mentally rather than spoken of heard. Its phoneme, a mental abstraction in itself, it manifests orally by one or more sound called allophones, which are perceivably sound corresponding to phoneme and various environment. Phoneme and how to find them. The phonological rules of the language apply to phonemes and determine the pronunciation of words. Here are a couple of examples that draw of common experience of reading and writing English. Next, the process of substituting one sound for another in a word to see if makes the difference is a good way to identify the phonemes of a language. Here are 12 words different only in their vowels. Next, distinctive feature of phonemes. The phonetic feature of voicing therefore distinguishes the two words. Next, phonemics pattern may vary across languages. We have seen that the same phonemes may occur in two languages, but pattern differently because the phonologies are different. English, Portuguese, and Akan have oral and nasal vowel phones. In English, oral and nasal vowels are openness of one phoneme. Whereas in Portuguese and Akan they represent distinct phonemes. Natural class of speech sounds. Phonological rules often apply to natural classes of sound. A natural class is a group of sound described by small numbers of distinct features such as it would be just as likely for a language to have a rule such as necessary vowels before P, I, or Z is to have a rule such as number 2, nasalis vowels before M, N, or R. Feature specification for American English consonant and vowels. Here a feature matrix for vowels and consonant in English. By selecting all segments marked the same for one or more feature, you can identify natural causes. The rules of phonology. Phonology rules are part of speakers' knowledge of the language. The phonemics representation are minimally specific because some feature of or feature vowels are predefined. For example, in English, all nasal consonants are voiced, so we don't need to specify voicing in the phonemics feature metric for nasals. Okay, so this is the references that we use, which is from the Fromkin book, An Introduction to Language. Next. Okay, thank you so much for listening to our material today, which is phonetic and phonology. We are so sorry if there are any mistakes that we made. We apologize, and thank you so much.